Hello, everybody. Now, most of you will know Karl Ove's work from My Struggle, which is obviously his autobiographical novel in 6 volumes, but that only actually represents 2 years of his publishing life in the original language. And before he started that, he'd written 2 novels. Since he's finished, he's written more novels and also written essays and all sorts of different sorts of literatures. And it is to the novel that he has returned with The Morning Star, a hefty tome, can I say, Karl Ove? I mean, as we have come to expect. It has been described in the New York Times as a hybrid of a Stephen King novel, a multi-perspective realist drama, true crime thriller, and a theological spiritual treatise, which only sums up a fraction of its many attributes, I would have thought, according to my reading. Can you just explain to us, let's just go right to the absolute beginning and say, what does the title mean? To what does The Morning Star, this rather portentous title, refer?
Well, it refers to the morning star. And that's the one thing in the book that kind of, every element in the books kind of comes together in that. The novel takes place in 2 days, I think, in 2 different locations in Norway, with 9 different characters, 9 different lives, 9 different kind of, struggles and life. And then there is a star coming up on the sky. Oh, they don't know it's a star. They don't know what it is. It's just a phenomenon up there, a light up there, kind of.
It's a freak phenomenon.
Yeah, and nobody knows what it is, and it has never been seen, and it is really, really visible. So it's threatening and beautiful, and yeah, all you can think of, and it's just above them, but their lives continues down there, nevertheless.
Now, I did an interview with you when it was only partly translated. I have to say it has been very nicely translated by Martin Aitken, but he was only halfway through it, very understandably, when I interviewed you for the Bergen Festival on the basis of the first 300 pages. And it was a completely different novel at the 300-page mark to at the 600-page mark.
Yeah. Well, I wrote it without knowing anything. All I knew when I started out was The Morning Star, and that it should be kind of a multitude of people, a choir of people. That was all I knew. So every time I kind of moved it forward, I had to, adjust and to expand and I never knew what was going to happen. So I got myself cornered a lot, but that was great fun, really. So if you read it, I never know more than the reader at the moment you're reading it. So it's all improvised, and that's why it kind of changed suddenly, because there's so much things that's going on in the beginning that has to have an impact on what will happen next, I think.
I mean, that's totally fascinating for me as a reader, because that you don't often have that experience of sort of actually, it almost put me in the real time of you writing it, that I was, as a reader, experienced it in 2 time zones.
Yeah, I've always actually done that. I never planned anything, and I just have to keep the curiosity, and I think that is somehow visible in the text. There is a certain greedy energy for knowing, and that's my energy, and the book's energy, I think. Might be terrible also. That's the backside of it. It could be completely on the wrong track and do completely the wrong thing, and I just have to keep going anyway.
I mean, certainly it's a really interesting and risky strategy, and I'm interested that you keep going back to it. So you obviously have succeeded so far. It hasn't completely backfired. But anyway, we mentioned that there were 9 characters in it, and I wondered if you might give us a sense of it by reading from the opening chapter in first a little bit in Norwegian and then in English. And this is a character called Arnie.
Yeah, that's right. He's on holiday with his family in southern Norway, He's a literature professor, and he has 2 twins and a daughter. And this is how it starts. So I read first in Norwegian. Den plutselige tanken på at guttene lå og sov inne i huset bak meg mens mørket falt over havet, var så vennlig og fredfull at jeg ikke slapp tak i den da den kom, men jeg forsøkte å holde den fast og lokalisere det gode i den. Vi hadde satt garn noen timer tidligere, så hendene deres måtte lukte salt, tenkte jeg. Det var ingen sjanse for at jeg hadde vasket dem, siden jeg ikke hadde sagt noe om det. De likte å gjøre overgangen mellom våken tilstand og søvn så liten som mulig. I alle fall bare vrengte de av seg klærne, la seg under dyna og lukket øynene uten en gang å slukke lyset. Did you get anything of that? I have to say the translation by Martin Aitken is really wonderful. Normally I don't check the translations because I'm too scared that it will be terrible. But this time with all the different narrators, I had to do it. And when I started, it was like reading, reading what I've written. I couldn't, just slide into it. So that's really, really a brilliant job he's done. And this is the opening then. The sudden thought that the boys were asleep in their beds inside a house behind me, while the darkness descended on the sea, was so pleasant and peaceful that I wouldn't let go of it at first, but tried instead to sustain it and pin down what was good about it. We had put the nets out a few hours earlier, so I imagined their hands still smelling of salt. There was no way they would have washed them without me telling them to. They liked to make the transition between being awake and asleep as brief as possible. At any rate, they would pull off their clothes, get under the covers and close their eyes without so much as switching the light off, as long as I didn't intervene with my calls for them to brush their teeth, wash their faces, fold their clothes up neatly on the chair. Tonight, I'd said nothing, and they had simply slipped into their beds like some long-limbed, smooth-skinned species of animal. But that wasn't what had felt so good about the thought. It had been the idea of the darkness falling independently of them, that they were sleeping as the light outside their rooms retreated from the trees and the forest floor to shimmer faintly for a short while in the sky, before it too darkened, and the only light left in the landscape came from the shining moon, spectral in its reflection on the surface of the bay. Yes, that was it. That nothing ever stopped, that everything only went on and on. Day became night, night became day, summer became autumn, autumn became winter, year followed year, and they were a part of it, at that very moment, as they lay sound asleep in their beds, as if the world were a room they visited.
Thank you, thank you. Now, that first chapter is quite disarming because that feels very like you.
Yeah, exactly.
It feels like you. Is that a deliberate thing?
It's not a deliberate thing, but I was, this is a novel where supernatural things happens, and it is a novel with distinct, different kind of characters, and I've never done such a thing, and I wanted it to be grounded somewhere, and I started out in something I kind of know, so it's very much my own writing here. But the trick is that it isn't me, and it is kind of it's, how can I explain it? It's the parts for me in details here and there, and then in the end, it's very different. But I think the feeling of the writing is very much the same.
Yeah, and even the setup, the fact that Arnie has a wife who has a bipolar disorder, and is dealing with sort of bringing up the children and managing a difficult domestic situation because of the mental health. That's very familiar from your writing. Yeah,
it is, except that the person is very different from my wife, which I just ex-wife that I described in my struggle. But the situation is, that character is becoming psychotic. And the main character reacts by starts to drink, and he's drinking a lot, and he just escapes from the whole thing and drive drunk from the children and from everything. And there was someone quite close to me who asked me why I haven't told that I was drink driving. You know, it's such a big thing. Why didn't you tell me? Because I never did it. It's not me. It's not my family. It's different. But some of the things I have experienced is in the novel, and that goes for all of the characters. There is some sort of emotional truth or something, you know, a scene from earlier or something that I put in there to make them believable for myself, you know. So there is a woman, I think she's around 20. She's very lonely. She is bright, but she's so shy that she started to study. She just couldn't face studying. She couldn't face the other students. And then now she's working at the local supermarket. And how to describe for me, I mean, I'm a middle-aged man in my 50s, how to describe a young woman now in her 20s. And I draw my own loneliness when I was 16, some episodes that I remember from my own life, and just put it there. But that doesn't mean I'm writing about myself. It's quite the opposite. You know, I'm using that kind of to somehow make it believable and make her alive for me when I'm writing. And then she does all kind of other things and have all kind of other thoughts, and that's kind of the way this book goes. It's very, I tried to kind of have a range of people, you know, different ages, different sexes, different occupations, different level of thinking, but they have one thing in common, and that is that they do only understand fractions of things. They understand only fractions of themselves, really. It's different kind of bits that you understand, but they're all restricted. And I think that's how it is. I think that's a true realist, you know, path in this book. It's everyone have restricted insight in what's going on. So for instance, the Morning Star people, some see this and others see that, but for them it's a complete, you know, but for us as readers it's just parts and bits of it.
So you go straight from that opening chapter on Arnie into Catherine, who is a priest and a theologian, and this is where, and in the uncanny immediately gets introduced. So she goes to she meets somebody in an airport, and then she later finds out that she couldn't have met him because he's dead, and she's been asked to officiate at his funeral. So you've sort of switched genre immediately in that second chapter, from a sort of realist, what seems like a realist family domestic novel, to something very spooky.
Well, there are some uncanny elements in the first two, I have to say, because there are some very unnatural movements in with animals. He's driving at night, and there are crabs coming over through the forest.
Oh, that's later on, isn't it?
No, it isn't.
It says there are crabs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the way that chapter ends. So you know something is going on, and then it's right. The really kind of uncanny things come with Katrine. And she tried to understand it and finds all kind of rational ways to deal with it, but it is really, it's a very weird incident. And also there's no one in the funeral, so she's doing it for an empty church. And it's kind of like that for every character, that they are, they were embedded in their own lives and situations. So when we meet Katrine first, she's leaving a seminar, Bible translation seminar in Oslo, goes to the plane, sits down, and realizes she doesn't want to go home. She's been away for the weekend, and she just doesn't want to go home. And that's a terrible thought to get, because something has been going on in her, and then it's kind of come to the surface there. And then she has to deal with her job, which is exactly this: is to comfort people and to give sermons and to bury bury this man. And she also has kind of it isn't the crisis of belief, but she have had that, and she've kind of found her way, but still she actually prays to God like a very desperate way. I need you, now, and that's a personal thing. That's her personal life. And what I wanted to do in this book was to what's going on, but I wanted to get them into the people and the people's life and into a context which makes it much more complex. It's so different reading an essay about a topic than to kind of read that and try to understand that in the context you are in, which is always incredibly complex. So that's part of it, and that's also why the novel is incredibly slow moving. There is one big movement, that's the Morning Star, and then it's all kind of this down there in a domestic domain. So
it struck me that the trick you play of the crabs, which you mentioned in the first chapter, which come up again later, and the various visitations. There are various visitations by freaky, plagues of frogs or deer in odd places, and that is Stephen King. It's like the opening to Carrie, which is the Rain of Stones, isn't it? But it is also biblical.
Yeah.
I wondered what was going on in your mind there. Is it, were you deliberately invoking Stephen King, or were you treading this duality deliberately with that imagery?
No, it has really nothing to do with Stephen King. That must just be a coincidence that we have kind of the same interest or whatever. And actually, I've seen a few films, filmatizations of his books, but I never read him. So that's a coincidence. But I am somehow, I think this is a book about boundaries, and where the boundaries starts to kind of move or almost to be dissolved. So there's one boundary between men and animals, for instance, or man and nature, and that's one. And there's another one between life and death. And there is something moving here. So what you see when you see the animals start to enter the human world and start to behave in different ways is that. And so somehow the Morning Star is something is changing, and you don't know what it is. But I've always been, if you're interested in human beings, you should also be interested in animals, because, such a thing as, what do you say, consciousness? It's not our privilege. It exists in the animals too, and it's kind of, you could follow it, and it's a mystery where it starts, and it's a mystery where human starts and animal stops, and it's like we have. I was thinking, in a way, I thought for myself when I wrote this, that we have turned our back to nature, and that is also the nature in ourselves somehow. So that's why these things are moving and kind of changing, and it's not explicit in the book, but it's just a feeling of something is going on, and it's also the feeling of that I have, that I know everything. I know absolutely everything. I'm completely safe. I know what a forest is. I know what a fox is. I know everything about any country in the world, but I've never been there, and when I come there, I understand really nothing. It's just a feeling I have. And I wanted this book to kind of set up something that you really don't understand, to kind of see that's how the world really is somehow. Maybe that's a bit banal, but it's part of this novel's project, is to make things start to move, I think.
Whether deliberately or by chance, it relates to an emerging body of work which invokes the uncanny, particularly, and in particularly in a sort of end of the world sense, that nature is bursting through. We can no longer understand what is happening to us and our planet, and it's very tied up with climate fiction. And I kept wondering whether that was the direction this novel was going in, but it doesn't seem to actually go in that direction. Do you see it as being partly a reflection of that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a reflection of being here now in the world. I think, and I think you could see the way we're thinking about nature, the way we're thinking about trees, the way we're thinking about animals is somehow changing. And this is only the first book. There will be more books, so this is a topic that we kind of continue in a way. But I read a lot of books about the forest, for instance. A lot of things I just didn't know about
communication between trees, for example.
For instance, and one book called How Forest Thinks, and just the feeling of that kind of an ecosystem is a way of thinking almost, but it's so distant from us that we can't grasp it, we can't see it, we can't understand it. But maybe all those kind of things is incredibly interesting to me. It's not so much of that in this book, but it's it is there somehow very vaguely in the background. And I would never write a kind of book about climate crisis, because we know and we are aware, and it's not that interests me. I think it's not, but it is something there anyway.
Can we just talk a little bit more about this thing about what genre it is, which many genres it's in?
Yeah.
Because leading on from my thing about is it Stephen King or is it biblical? It sort of it touches on so many different sorts of writing. Did you have a sense of writing a novel, or did you have a sense of writing a treatise on something in fictional form? I just wonder what the driving force was when you were writing it.
Oh no, very much the feeling of writing a novel. I mean, the brilliant thing about a novel is that it can contain everything, every kind of writing it can contain. And that's why it still can develop and still can, change from epoch to epoch. So I've always, for instance, loved to write essayistic in my novels. So it's a habit I have, and maybe I shouldn't, but there is an essay in this book about death written by one of the characters, for instance. But I didn't consciously think about genres when I wrote it. I thought about characters, and they are very different from me. So maybe they are in different books. I don't know. But it's the totality that's the novel, and it might not be a novel. I mean, it could be completely, as you say, a treatise on something. But to me, it is very much a novel, and I do love that.
Sorry, I'm rushing you, because as you can see, I'm very engaged with it. In that the chapter later on, which is this character called Eggil. I don't know how do you pronounce his name?
Eggil, yeah.
Eggil, like that. Who's a friend of Arne's, who comes into his own in the second half. So I only encountered him in this second reading of it. I didn't meet him in the first time I read it. But even in his treatise, which is the sort of brings the book to an end, I thought, oh, we're going into an essay. But then suddenly it goes back into fiction again at the back of the essay, and there's another whole story that arises out of his essay.
Yeah, that was because he writes an essay about death, and it's very abstract. It has kind of philosophical elements to it, and it goes back to the history of the underworld and all the kind of ways people have thought about death. And then I realized death is something completely different. It's, if you meet it, it's not abstract. It's not an intellectual game. It's real and horrible in a completely different way. It's like it erases everything around it, and there's no words around it. So then I knew I had just to put him on the train in the essay, go out and to meet. He meets a person. He's in the train, sleeper to Bergen. There's a person coming in. He's drinking, offering him beer, and he resists. But then in the end, he starts to drink, and then that person is incredibly open, just tells everything, and they get this kind of connection because they will never meet again. And he's very drunk and very angry, and he's on the way to his daughter's funeral, and she's just a little girl who died. And then he goes there, and he's drunk, and there's a scandal. But what can he do? There's nothing left for him, so he could just fuck all of that. And Eggil kind of follows him and tries to take care of him and deals with it that way. And then he comes back to his cabin where he lives, and then the morning stars rises, and the book ends there.
But now you are spoiling your own book here. Can we spoil this book? Is there such a thing as spoilers? I was puzzling about this because I was thinking, how much of the story do we tell? But actually, in a way, it's unspoilable, isn't it? We can tell any bit of the story because it's not a sort of it's not a thriller in the sense that you don't sort of come to a great conclusion. Every bit revolves around itself.
Didn't even think about that. Maybe you should edit this part out. It's not fun to spoil it. It's no, I just wanted to make a context for the character and the thing, his essay, to make that point that he needs the real life to make it kind of there's about that. That was why I told, but I told maybe too much. Maybe you're right.
Yeah, no, I don't think you did actually. I think that's. I think it is a real thing that actually you can talk about any one chapter, but you're not actually spoiling it because it's how those chapters relate to the other chapters is the point of it. It's constantly winding you back into the weave of the story. Now, there's something very interesting going on about the ambivalent, who is telling the story, and you talk about every narrator only sees partially, but there's also an ambivalence about who gets to tell the story. And in Eggil is a case in point, because Eggil, one way of looking at Eggil is he's a trustafarian, isn't he? He's a rich boy who's being kept. Yeah. He's never actually had to take any responsibility. He has a very bad relationship with his own son because he can't really be bothered to be a father. Yeah. And if you're moral about anything, it seems to me there is a morality about parenting in your work. So in a way, Eggil is not a reliable person or a good person.
Yeah, no, it is a book with many children, but none of them says anything, but you can just see them kind of in the background, and many of them are openly or suffering, or they're not in a good place, and the parents seem not to be aware of it, especially in the case with Eggil. But he's kind of obsessed with freedom. So
but
in
it's
the
a
beginning,
freedom that's been bought for him, which I thought was really interesting. He's not manacled to a job like Tovid or some of the other characters. And so therefore he doesn't have responsibility.
Exactly, and then he doesn't know what freedom is, because that's kind of, it's not a point with him, but it's part of one of the subjects in the book. Is about freedom and responsibility, and that's kind of constantly going on in all of them, and but especially in him. And he's the one who's vocal about it, and he's the one who expresses the desire for freedom and kind of chooses his life for that, and he becomes a religious person very much because he finds something liberating and freeing in the Bible. We don't have to go into detail there, but at the same time he has to take care of his son, and he can't, and the mother just puts the son on the bus and says, you have to go and get him, and he can't really do it, and it's terrible for him, of course. But then there is a certain irony in those two kind of levels in him, but it's not he's trying. It's not that he's a bad person, but he's just as you say, he's a rich man, so he's never had to do anything, and he's very privileged. But it's not like it's not like he's speaking for me. People start to ask me that, is he speaking for you or is she speaking for you? None of them are. They're all speaking for the novel. That's the whole point.
So then the other character who you'd expect maybe to be one of the authorities is the journalist, and the journalist is the clown figure in a way in this, who is a sort of drunken, dissolute. He's been moved down the chain because he can't be trusted. They think he can't be trusted with news anymore. He's been moved to arts, which he's very dismissive of, and it's a sort of comic thing. So all the time you're undercutting the people who would be expected to be the storytellers.
Yeah, well, he's kind of sorry, could you hear that?
Yeah, just a bit.
Okay, maybe you just repeat the question and we can take it from there.
So the other person who you might expect to be the storyteller is the journalist, but the journalist is in a way the clown of the piece. He's a comic, grotesque figure. He's dissolute. He's lost his way. He's been demoted to arts. A bit of a, that's an in-joke for you as somebody who writes passionately about the arts.
Yeah, well, he was when he turned up, the idea was having a journalist writing about culture, really, really hating culture, hating the cultural scene, hating, everything in it. But he has to kind of obey to it, and he has to interview people and be respectful, but he really hates it. And that kind of tension in that was fun for me to write. And then he just developed the way he did. But he's also, he's a character somehow, but he has also kind of an ambivalence to him. He has writing ambitions somehow. He has some poems he's kind of doing when he's going around drinking and thinking and being terrible. So I don't know how it is to be a man like that from the inside, but I've certainly have seen them from the outside. And it's a lot of and then he goes on a grand tour also at the end of the book, but I might not talk about that then. There's enough spoilers.
No. So now there's a lot of theology in this novel, and you have written a lot around religion before in your fiction as well as in your non-fiction, and particularly it goes right back to the Book of Miracles, sort of 16th century theological text, but then there's a lot of Kierkegaard in it. How seriously should we take that?
That's a good question. Well, it's part of Kierkegaard is Eggil's, the character Eggil's. That's where Kierkegaard appears, and for him is deadly serious. Both the Fear and Loathing book, which is about the father sacrificing or wanting or going to sacrifice his son, by then turning completely his back to society and facing the unknown, horrible, cold universe. And then it's a really beautiful sermon that Kierkegaard did that's called The Lily on the Field and the Bird Under the Sky or something, which is really about the moment, the now, that Kierkegaard kind of calls the beginning of the kingdom. So a bird is not affected by the future, not affected by the past. It's only here and now, and then it's happy and it's good. It's a kind of a crazy utopian thought, but that's for Eggil, that's freedom, And so for him it's serious, and then you have layers of different things also that contradicts that. His life, for instance, contradicts it. So if you see his son and him, and then you have Isaac and Abraham, it's kind of they're taking place at the same time, but one in biblical past level and one here and now, you know, and it's like an echo of that, and it's that all the way through. And then you have Katrine, also a Christian because she's a priest. Her Christianity is completely different. If Eggil is turning away from society and God is something above us, out there, completely mysterious, then Katrine's religion is you and me. It's the other. It's about mercy. It's about all of those kind of things, and both you can relate to the Bible, of course. And I don't think they are necessarily religious. I think there are kind of ways of understanding what it is to be somehow, and the only language we have for that is religion and literature. So for me, it's I don't know why I go there all the time, because I'm not a Christian. I don't go around reading the Bible, don't think much about these things, but it's like in the writing, it kind of just hooks up to it time and again. And I guess
was an existentialist, wasn't he? I mean, he was sort of in a way the first existentialist. Is that what it is about him that is so fascinating?
No, and I don't. I mean, I'm not at all a philosopher. I have no idea what they call them or something. But I just do, for instance, him. I just love his writing, and he writes in Danish. You can read it, you know. And he's by far the greatest writer ever coming from Scandinavia. He's so brilliant, and he wrote all his books like in 3 years or something. And it's completely. It's just literature to me. But he's searching, you know, and he's very extreme in his thinking, and. Yeah, what else can you write about? What else can you have to search for some sort of meaning, some sort of, you know, and then everything is also dissolved in life, you know, and those kind of things are going on constantly in the book. And I know it's not very catchy to have Kierkegaard in a book or have the Bible in a book or whatever. It doesn't seem contemporary, but to me it is very contemporary, because it's always, those questions are almost like the only questions.
The person I was quite surprised that didn't get name checked, I kept expecting him to, was Freud, because of his, you know, his great essay on the unheimlich, the uncanny. I mean, he sort of invented that.
Yeah.
The concept of the uncanny, and I kept thinking, and which was, of course, to Freud is the id resurfacing its repression resurfacing itself. And I thought, I was thinking, is this actually all Freudian? I mean, is that something that's going on in your mind or not?
Yeah, well, that's an intriguing question, because I never pick who I'm writing about. It's not like I should write about him, or I should write about her, or I should write about that book. I never do that. I just write, and then they come. Then okay, like Kierkegaard, then I go there, and then, you know, and Freud never turns up. So maybe I have suppressed him completely, and there is some sort of mechanism that kind of, I never written about him, you know, never think about him. Maybe there's a reason for that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think you must be there somewhere, because the way you're treading these lines between sort of hyperrealism and fantasy.
Yeah,
that's absolutely him.
Yeah.
There you go. So the other thing I want to ask you about is, you don't deliver a sort of novelistic sense of everything coming together. Having read the first half, which I think is what I read when we first interviewed, I first interviewed you, I was waiting for these stories to be resolved, and there are endless stories there which never get resolved. You don't even come back to them, and each one is fascinating. So it's a sort of a novel of frayed edges all the way through it. Why do you do that?
Well, the thing is, I started this story, and I have some idea of where it should end. But when I wrote it, it was so kind of very slowly moving, the whole novel. So I just, you know, it's like just being by the foot of the story. So there's coming more. Not everything will be resolved, but they will be followed up somehow. But I do like the idea of just making a cut into some life, you know, like one day there and then leave it, and then one day there and then leave it, and yeah. But I will come back to the characters. But I do think it's it makes a certain restless mood in the book somehow when you're leaving, and some of them are we coming back to, but there's a lot of things we don't know, a lot of mysteries that's not solved, but there will be more in this world to come.
So you're going to have, this is a part work, and you'll have a second volume of this novel, will you?
Yeah, the second volume I just finished.
With the same characters.
The thing is that the second volume is a prequel, so that takes place earlier, but then the third novel would be a sequel with the same characters.
So we could expect possibly some of these loose ends to be picked up in that third volume. Maybe is there actually a pattern in your mind that you haven't given us?
No, I don't know where they would go, but I do only have an ending in sight, and I'm writing towards that ending. That's the quote I often give when I do things like this is, what was the name of the man who wrote Alexandra Quartet?
Oh, Darrell. Lawrence Darrell.
Yeah, Darrell, yeah, he said once that making an art of work is to set yourself a goal and then go there in your sleep. And that's pretty much what I'm doing. So I have one ending, and then I don't know where I'm going to get there, but that's the writing. That's what writing is, I think, for me.
Mm. One of the comments that's made, a criticism of your work, although actually I find is that the sort of affectlessness of the voice. The voice is the same, the language is the same. Now I actually really like it. I find it sort of quite hypnotic. And the one area in which the voices of men and women in this novel seem to be really distinguished is in their language when they're directly addressing their children. That the mothers use endearments that the fathers don't use.
Mm.
But apart from that, but it's not that Arnie is a good father. It's not that necessarily the mothers are better parents, but that seems to be the one sort of area where there's a sort of distinction. What is this? This sort of very cultivated evenness that you write with is fascinating to me.
Well, I don't know. I can't really see my writing from the outside, but I do remember very well when I started this book. I had long discussions with my editor about how to do it, because we have different characters. Should I have kind of different language? Should I, how far should I go? And I really wanted I wanted to keep my way of writing, and then kind of channel it through different characters and go in different directions, so that there would be a difference, so that someone has this field, other has that field, and there is a difference in mood and ways, but it's all in my language, and to me it's, if that's working, it's fine. If not, well, I didn't want to have too much elements of pretending, like in the writing. So we ended up concluding, just write, just go ahead and publish. And so but I'm thinking a lot about it, because I'm also writing more, and it's it's a recurring thing to me. So it's not on purpose, but it is still, everybody can read the title of the author in front of the book, so they know, okay, it's him who's written this. So, but I really want people to go into the characters and be present in their different worlds.
And I felt that you did, and this fascinates me, is how you do that when the work, the actual vocabulary they use and the syntax they use and the sort of rhythm of the prose is so similar in all the chapters, and yet they're very clearly distinguished. It's a sort of magic trick you play, and I wondered whether it's different in Norwegian, or whether it's the same.
I have only read bits and pieces of the translation, so I haven't read it completely, because I really can't stand reading my own books. But my impression of that is that it is somehow the same. But I can't, I don't know. There are many nuances in Norwegian that I don't know how would play out in English, and I can't see them in English. I mean, so I don't really know. You have to ask Martin Aitken, I think.
Is he your regular translator, or is this the first one he's done for you?
No, he has translated me a lot before, and it's translated huge parts of My Struggle 6, for instance. And he's absolutely brilliant.
And so you're at the moment, did you say you've written the second volume of this, and you're on to the third? So it's actually finished, the second volume? Yeah,
the second is finished, yeah.
Is it as long as this?
It's longer.
It's longer. So by the time we've got to the third, we're into another sort of 12,000 page epic 3-volume.
I don't know how much it is, but it's I have to write until it's finished. That's just how it is. But the point is, it should be standalone books. So Morning Star is a standalone book. The second one is a standalone book, and so on. But there will be, if you want, you can see the connections and follow the movements. But if you don't, you can just read the single books.
Are you doing other stuff as well, or is this taking up all your energy at the moment?
The writing?
Yeah, I mean these novels. Are you doing any more of your art histories or your journalistic?
No. I'm completely dedicated my time to write novels now. So this is, and I publish one each year, and so this next one is going to be 800 pages, which is it's a lot of work throughout the year. So it will be occupying me.
So for somebody who declared after My Struggle that your aim had been to write yourself to the point at which you would no longer be a writer, you're actually doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Was that just a tease, or did you actually believe it at the time?
I wanted it, there's so many things that has been kind of connected to writing. There's all ambitions, there's all the vanity, it's all the, it's all the narcissism, it's all of that. It's always there. I just got a question, who do you want most to read your book? And I thought, could I send my book to someone I really kind of, admire or respect? No, I can't, because why can't I? Because I think it's like that. And then, but I still publish it, it's a very, very difficult thing. And it's, at that time when I wrote My Struggle, I thought I'd pour everything out, just stop and, be done with it and live on. But then there is so much good in writing. It's like, it's a selfless place. It's a healing place. It's a place where you can, explore things, and you can do your thinking. It's like, it's a good place. But it's outside of that place, between publishing it, that it starts a bit difficult. And I think that was what I wanted to just end then, and I really wanted to. Also because of the attention at that time was like crazy. But now it's fine. I mean, I'm very. I don't really want to end anything. I want to now to continue to write novels. That's my aim and ambition.
Do you feel that My Struggle hangs around your neck to in a way that you'd prefer it didn't, or are you quite happy with it? Have you made your peace with it?
No, I think it would be stupid for me to think like that, because with My Struggle I got many readers, which is and in some way I know it was meaningful to some of them, which is what you want or you can really hope for, when you start out as a writer, and that's a good thing. And of course I'm not always that intrigued to talk about My Struggle after 10 years of talking about My Struggle, but it still is just a book. It is literature. It is kind of out there, and it's 2 years of my life, as you said in the beginning, it's a kind of a cutout of my life, and yeah, it's perfectly fine, and it also made it possible for me to publish this novel, I mean, and maybe the next.
So maybe the parting words we have to go with this is the end of the novel, which is "It has begun."
Yeah, exactly.
It has begun. What has begun, we have yet to see, and long may it continue. And it just remains for all you people listening to this now to go out and buy The Morning Star and read it, and then maybe you can keep your door open with it afterwards. But it's very, very well worth reading. Thank you very much.
Thank you.